I used to think growing old meant peace, but peace shattered the moment I saw my son's name on the mortgage contract. The August light was fading outside the windows of my modest apartment in Stafford Heights. The sun dipped behind rows of neatly trimmed hedges, casting long shadows across the beige walls I'd painted myself 20 years ago. A quiet suburban evening until Sophie pulled out the manila folder like it was part of dessert. It's just some refinancing paperwork, she said, her voice sugar-coated as she set it on the dinner table. Helps boost Liam's credit. Totally standard. I looked from her face to the folder and then back again. Liam said nothing. He sat next to her, his shoulders slightly hunched, chewing without tasting. That alone should have told me something was off. I'd like to read through it, I said, reaching for the papers. Sophie's smile didn't crack, but her tone cooled. Of course. If you don't trust us, trust. It was a loaded word in this house. 3 months ago, when Liam and Sophie moved in just for a while, I told myself it was temporary. They were saving for a place. Rent in the city was high. They needed help, and I, soft-hearted widowed used to silence, let them in. I scanned the first few lines. Balloon payment, lien holder, secondary collateral. Legalese wasn't foreign to me. Years as a court clerk had trained my eye. But this wasn't just clarification. It was binding. Something inside me stirred, but Sophie leaned forward, hands clasped over mine. You're helping us build a future, she said. Liam's so lucky to have a father like you. I looked to my son, hoping for affirmation. He nodded vaguely, eyes not meeting mine, and somehow that stung more than anything. So I signed. Her lips brushed my cheek. You're the most generous father-in-law in the world. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun above, whirring like a clock, ticking down to something inevitable. I replayed dinner the way Sophie had slid those documents across, like a waitress offering dessert specials. The way Liam avoided eye contact. The tremor in my gut wasn't going away. I got up quietly, careful not to wake them. In my study, I powered on my old laptop, slow but still functional. I opened the file I'd scanned earlier just in case, a carbon copy from the dotted line. And there it was, not a refinancing memo, a second mortgage contract, securing my home as collateral for a $600,000 loan, terms hidden in footnotes, language dressed in ambiguity, a balloon clause that would detonate in 2 years. I'd seen worse in court, but never imagined it would follow me home. In the stillness of that hour, something inside me shifted. I stood in the kitchen staring at the contract, listening to Sophie's laughter echo down the hallway from their room, and I knew I'd just handed her a loaded gun with my name on the barrel. The knock at my door wasn't friendly. It came with a lawsuit, a court summons, and the collapse of whatever scraps of faith I had left in my son. The courier didn't even look me in the eye, just handed me a thick envelope, asked me to sign a digital pad, and walked away. I closed the door slowly, the weight of the envelope heavier than its physical form could justify. Inside, plaintiffs Liam Hale and Sophie Hale, defendant Thomas Hale, a civil suit. They were suing me for $600,000, claiming I had misrepresented the agreement on the refinancing paperwork. The words struck like a gavel to the chest: fraud, coercion, breach of fiduciary responsibility. For a moment I just stood there, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. I'd imagined shouting or, at the very least, an ugly confrontation. Instead, they chose the clinical brutality of the legal system. No warning, no attempt to talk. Just this, an official declaration of war. Cold, efficient, cowardly. Later that day, I found myself standing in front of a small brick building in Brooklyn, the local community legal aid center. The air smelled like car exhaust and cheap coffee. Inside, everything was beige walls, chairs, even the receptionist's blouse. I waited 15 minutes before they called my name. A woman in her early 30s extended a hand. Sarah Whitman. I'm a legal fellow here. Let's take a look. Her eyes sharpened as she read. Page after page, her brow furrowed deeper. This clause here, accelerated lien assertion. That's not standard in residential mortgages. And here they inserted a post-dated subrogation waiver. Who drafted this? My daughter-in-law, I said flatly. Sarah let out a low whistle. This reads like a setup, a very meticulous one. She continued flipping, then paused. Did you keep anything from the day you signed? I reached into my worn leather satchel and pulled out a flash drive. Scanned copy. I always back up legal documents, even personal ones. She inserted it into her laptop. Her face stiffened. Mr. Hale, this isn't carelessness. It looks orchestrated. Her tone was no longer just professional, it was surgical. Focused. She leaned in. They're trying to bankrupt you, Mr. Hale, but we might be able to bankrupt them first legally. That sentence didn't fill me with hope. It filled me with clarity. I walked out of her office not afraid but resolute. They had declared war in court. I would answer with silence, with truth, and with time. Some witnesses wear uniforms. Others water their plants at just the right time and never forget a face. The Rusty Bean Cafe was modest. Wooden tables, warm lights, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and old paperbacks. Ellen McKinley always sat near the window with her tablet, a cup of black coffee, and that calm, discerning gaze of hers. She had the kind of presence that made people pause before lying. I slid into the seat across from her, not entirely sure how to begin. We'd exchanged pleasantries for years, never more than a wave, a borrowed cup of sugar, or a kind nod. Today I needed more. We chatted briefly about the weather, the overgrown hedges between our homes, and the coffee, which she insisted was better 2 years ago, before they switched beans. But then I said it, casually, like tossing a pebble into still water. Sophie's been staying with me lately, my daughter-in-law. Her hand paused, mid-air, spoon suspended over her coffee. Then it dropped gently into the saucer. Sophie Landon, I nodded. That's her maiden name, yes. Ellen leaned back. Her eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in memory. She's your daughter-in-law, she repeated slowly. A beat passed. I knew her, she said finally, years ago, before she married your son. She didn't elaborate, not right away. She just looked out the window as if gauging whether it was worth revisiting whatever memory had surfaced. I waited. She ran a consulting business, Ellen said at last, voice measured. Targeted retirees, promised double-digit returns through real estate flips and high-yield accounts. And she vanished with half my nest egg. A cold silence settled between us. The low hum of a milk steamer in the background felt like thunder. I filed a complaint. So did others. But everything was vague, no formal contracts, no addresses. She used a business alias. We were all too embarrassed. No one pushed hard enough. I could feel the slow tightening in my chest. You're sure it was her? Ellen gave a mirthless laugh. Thomas, I never forget a financial lie. Or the person who tells it. She tapped her tablet awake, swiped a few times, and opened a folder. Rows of data blinked onto the screen. Dates, names, email headers. She used SL Management at the time. I kept these records, just in case. My husband thought I was being paranoid. She paused. He said, one day this might matter. I leaned closer. Can I see that? She turned the tablet toward me. There it was, a spreadsheet labeled Sophie Lies DexLSX. I never deleted it. Couldn't. It felt unfinished. I skimmed the entries. There were marketing emails, transaction histories, dates that aligned eerily with the stories Sophie had told me about her consulting work. You never reported this to anyone beyond your initial complaint, I asked. Not officially, but I've spoken to others. A few names still pop up in my HOA meetings. She didn't just burn me, Thomas. I stared at the data, names, amounts, patterns. This wasn't just bitterness. It was evidence. I'm working with a legal fellow, I said carefully. She's smart, focused. This might help. Ellen gave me a look not of hope but of recognition. Then let's make it count. I sipped my coffee half cold now and realized that for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I had an ally, one with sharp memory, sharper spreadsheets, and a personal score to settle. If Sarah could cross-reference Ellen's data with the mortgage documents, Sophie's past might just unravel her future. If they built a case on deception, then it's only fair I build my revenge on documentation. Sarah's office had transformed into a war room, legal pads stacked, high printouts tacked to corkboards, and in the center a whiteboard covered in red arrows, dates, and legal terminology that made my paralegal years feel like ancient history. Ellen sat across from me, her glasses low on her nose, scanning spreadsheet lines with a pen tapping rhythmically. Sarah paced, muttering legal terms under her breath. And in the far corner, quiet and observing, sat Tom Delaney, the private investigator Sarah brought in 2 days ago. He looked more like a substitute math teacher than a detective, but his eyes missed nothing. Sarah drew a circle on the whiteboard, Sophie Landon, maiden name. Then an arrow to another name, SL Management, LLC defunct. Another arrow to Liam Hale, co-signer. 3 fronts, she said. 1, the fraudulent mortgage agreement. 2, historical pattern of elder financial abuse. 3, undeclared income in hidden accounts. Tom cleared his throat. I found something, he said quietly. He opened his laptop and mirrored the screen onto the wall monitor. There on a Chase account statement was a wire transfer, $78 or so thousand. The account name, S. Landon Holdings. The transaction date, 4 days after the refinance of my property. It's registered under her maiden name, Tom explained. Linked to a Wyoming registered shell, LLC. The address traces back to a P.O. box in Newark. Sarah's eyebrows lifted. She laundered the refinance money. Tom nodded. Likely part of a series. I've tracked 3 more transfers in similar patterns over the last 2 years, each post-dated to coincide with new consulting gigs. Ellen didn't say a word. She simply pushed a printed sheet towards Sarah highlighted emails from Sophie's SL management era. Same P.O. box. She doesn't delete her trails, Ellen murmured. She just buries them. I watched as Sarah's fingers danced across her keyboard, aligning timelines, matching aliases, cross-referencing dollar figures. She didn't look like a community legal fellow anymore. She looked like someone preparing a financial assassination. We're not confronting Sophie, she said firmly. Not yet. She's arrogant. Let her think the worst is behind her. What's the next move, I asked. We file a motion to compel financial disclosure, she replied. Not based on the mortgage alone, but Ellen's affidavit tied to the larger fraud pattern. That forces Sophie to produce her bank statements or lie under oath. She'll lie, Ellen said flatly. Sarah smiled. Exactly. They would lure her into overconfidence, trap her in her own web of half-truths and manufactured innocence. She thinks this is just about the house, Sarah whispered almost to herself. But we're about to make it about her entire financial history. I looked at the chart on the wall, arrows, dotted lines, red exclamation marks. It no longer looked like chaos. It looked like a net slowly tightening. I had once believed my silence made me powerless. Now I knew better. Silence paired with strategy was lethal. They entered the mediation room hoping to crush me. Instead, they left carrying the shattered pieces of their own lies. The walls were cream-colored, the chairs too stiff, and the air so still it might have shattered with one wrong breath. This wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like one. Sophie sat across from me, legs crossed, arms draped confidently over the chair like it was her throne. Liam sat beside her, eyes avoiding mine, fingers twitching over a Starbucks cup. Sarah, composed and precise, placed her leather folio on the table like a surgeon laying down tools. The mediator, a gray-haired man in wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. Let's proceed, he said. Sophie spoke first. We're here to resolve this amicably. My husband and I are prepared to assume full ownership of the condo so Mr. Hale can avoid litigation. It's the compassionate option for a father nearing retirement. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just watched Sarah open her folio and select a single sheet. And in exchange, she asked. Sophie's smile thinned. He gets to keep his pension. And peace. Sarah nodded. Interesting. Before we consider that proposal, I have a few clarifications. She slid a paper across the table. Do you recognize this bank account, last 4 digits, 4289? Sophie blinked, then shrugged. I have several accounts. Of course, Sarah said. This one received a wire transfer of $78,000 on August 7th, 2 days after the refinancing of Mr. Hale's property. The mediator leaned forward slightly. Liam sat straighter. Sophie's lips parted, then closed again. Where is this going? She asked tightly. You'll see, Sarah replied smoothly. But first, Mr. Hale has invited someone who may help us with context. The door opened, and Ellen McKinley stepped in. She wore a navy cardigan, held a manila folder under her arm, and greeted the room with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sophie, she said, voice calm. It's been a while. Sophie's face turned from confusion to fury in seconds. She has nothing to do with this, I do, Ellen said. I'm a victim of your earlier schemes. And I've brought proof. Sarah handed the mediator another file. Ellen's records show Sophie ran a fraudulent investment operation targeting seniors, including her. Same P.O. box as the shell account we mentioned earlier. Same name. Sophie lunged forward. This is absurd. He's dragging old women into. But then she looked at me. Something in her snapped. You didn't even read the contract, Thomas. You signed it like a fool. Don't blame me for your senility. The room went dead silent. The mediator calmly reached for his pen. Noted, he said. Sophie froze. Sarah closed her folio. That'll be all for today. They left in silence. Liam couldn't look at me. Sophie stormed out, first phone already in hand, furious whispers filling the hallway. Sarah turned to me. She doesn't know what's coming next week. I raised an eyebrow. I'm forwarding the full dossier to the IRS, she said softly. Let's see how generous she feels after that. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks out of a courtroom in quiet dignity with a signature that ends a lineage of betrayal. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed his notes. Sophie sat rigid, lips pressed tight, a lawyer whispering in her ear. Liam looked like a man halfway between a confession and a collapse. I sat still. No smile, no frown. Just stillness. In the matter of Hale Veer. Hale, the judge began, voice firm, the court finds sufficient evidence of coercion, fiduciary abuse, and financial misrepresentation. The mortgage agreement is declared void. Full ownership is restored to Mr. Thomas Hale. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay all court fees and damages incurred. No outbursts, no gasps. Just the deafening weight of consequence settling on their shoulders. I walked out before they did. Outside the courthouse, Liam caught up to me. Dad, he started. I turned, eyes steady. You knew, and you let her do it. I walked away. 2 days later, Sarah and I sat in her office. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting gold onto a stack of finalized deeds and a new will. No more gaps, I asked. She smiled. None. It's ironclad. The house was now legally mine again, but this time I wasn't keeping it for legacy. I updated the will with 2 signatures, Ellen McKinley, medical power of attorney, and the future beneficiary of a modest foundation I'd set up to support seniors defrauded by family. Liam's name had been removed. Later that week, I spoke at a small community gathering. Not a speech, just a moment, really, but one I needed to say aloud. Family doesn't inherit your home, I said. The people who stand by you when the world turns its back on you, they do. Ellen stood quietly near the back. Sarah nodded from beside the projector. No fanfare, just truth. That night, as I locked my front door, something slid through the mail slot. A letter from the IRS, addressed to Sophie. I turned the kettle on. The lights of the city blinked beyond the window. And for the first time in months, the silence in my apartment didn't feel empty. It felt earned. They thought I was too old, too weak, too alone to fight back. But they forgot one thing: when you strip a man of everything, he has nothing left to lose but the truth. Justice didn't roar for me. It whispered through signed rulings, revoked lies, and doors I chose to close for good. No wall of deceit lasts forever against the weight of a well-documented truth. And no betrayal can bury a man who decides to rise on principle, not revenge. So if you're standing at the edge, uncertain and outnumbered, remember this: one steady voice, backed by facts, can still silence 1,000 lies.